Well, I was one 56-yard field goal away from having all of my predictions hit this weekend, but it is what it is. Conference championship weekend is in the books, and the playoff is set. We did get a little bit of drama. We'll talk about that in just a second. But let's go ahead and get right into breaking down these games, starting with the one that caused the most controversy, Clemson versus SMU. And the game itself didn't cause controversy, but what it did to impact the playoff committee's decision was controversial, and I'll get to that in just a second. But starting out with this game, I predicted SMU to win, and to be honest, I would do it again if they played the game over because I think SMU is the better team. That didn't matter on the field, but sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes the better team does not win, and that was the case in this game, I believe. Things could not have started out worse for SMU. They gave very favorable field position to Clemson early in this game, putting them in a bit of a hole really early. It felt like the big moment the moment was too big for SMU, and they just got punched in the mouth early. Clemson capitalized on all of SMU's mistakes, and SMU fought the whole game to cut into that lead. They went down big early, and they just were in catch-up mode the whole game, and they did eventually settle in, but even then it felt like it was still going to be too little too late, but they never gave up, and all of a sudden they found their way into a tied game with 16 seconds to go in the game, so it would look like it was going into overtime. Unfortunately for them, though, Clemson would break off a big kick return, putting them just out of field goal range, which they only really needed to get one big completion to get into field goal range, which they did. And then they kicked a 56-yard field goal to win the game on the final second. And, it sucked to see SMU fight so hard to come back and then succeed and then just blow it right at the end. But that's football. I mean, that kind of stuff happens. There's more to this game. Obviously, officiating was pretty questionable and very well may have changed the trajectory of the game several times. I definitely think Clemson deserved to be penalized more than they were. In fact, I don't really think they were penalized at all. I could be wrong about that, but I don't think I saw a single penalty go against Clemson. This game really caused a lot of controversy, though, because of its implications on the playoffs. Like I said earlier, we didn't know until today, when I'm recording this today at least, that whether or not SMU would fall out of the playoffs and, have Alabama, a 3-loss Alabama team, come up and take their spot because, we'd seen the committee do something like that before several times. People kind of thought that maybe Alabama would get the bump in over SMU, even with their 3 losses and not playing a conference championship game, which I feel like would have been wrong. But there were really only 3 outcomes this game could have had. And so while watching this, it was kind of interesting to see how it would play out. Scenario 1, SMU wins, Clemson's knocked out, Alabama's also in. That was the scenario that I think most people, including myself, thought would be the case. Scenario 2, Clemson wins a blowout game, and SMU drops out of the playoff field, and that elevates Alabama ahead of them. I thought that was pretty possible when I was seeing the early parts of this game. I thought we were going to get scenario 2 where, Clemson would be in and Alabama would be in. And that was what, going into this game, I thought was the least likely outcome. But, when I saw this game start going, I was like, I don't think SMU's going to win. Option 3, though, was Clemson wins a close game, and the committee has to make a decision on whether to drop SMU below Alabama or not. And that's what we got. We got option 3. And surprisingly, the committee made the correct and right decision in keeping SMU in. And so I'm really glad to see that. Teams in conference championship games should not be punished for playing in those conference championship games when deciding between a team that didn't make it to their conference championship game. And so I really do like the decision, although I know a lot of Alabama fans will disagree. And I can see and understand the argument of the strength of schedule thing where it's like, then why even schedule your hard opponents if they're just going to, punish you and say your record is what your record says you are, or, not really take into account the quality of your schedule. And my response to that would be, don't get blown out by Oklahoma at the end of the season. Because, I may have had more sympathy for you if they were close losses or to really good teams, but losing a blowout game to Oklahoma and then losing to Vanderbilt, those kind of losses are not, they don't give you a valid argument. I don't feel like, at least. I don't have any sympathy for you. And you're on the bubble. 3-loss teams, I'm not going to feel bad for you if you don't make the playoffs. Now, I would have said the same thing for Georgia. If Georgia would have lost and, they would have somehow gotten kicked out of the playoffs, I would not have been sitting here complaining because at 3 losses, you're not even really a playoff caliber team anyways, but that's a problem with the 12 team in general, in my opinion. But I know I've talked a lot about the implications of this game, probably more than the actual game itself, but I just feel like there isn't much more to say about the game. I mean, Clemson played a fairly mistake-free game, while SMU had an absolutely self-inflicted disaster meltdown to start the game. By the time the SMU settled in, like I said, they were down big, and even though that they were able to tie the game at the end, the mistakes really cost them because it put them in a situation where a field goal was enough to win. Massive props to Clemson, though, especially for the special teams units at the end there. Kick return and a 56-yard field goal. Very impressive way to close out this game. So both Clemson and SMU are in this thing, but I would argue SMU got the easier path as far as seeding goes in the playoffs, so that's pretty interesting. But I do think both teams are going to have a hard time advancing past their first round. I mean, SMU is going to have to play Penn State, and Clemson's going to have to play Texas, so it's a difficult route for both of them. I do think SMU's route is a little bit easier, though. Moving on now to the SEC Championship, Georgia versus Texas, and we got round 2 of this game. We saw Georgia versus Texas earlier in the season. Georgia blew out Texas because of a really weird game that was, not going to be duplicated here. That was pretty obvious. And while the score was not as lopsided this time, Georgia did still come out with the win. And as usual for Georgia, it was a tale of 2 halves. I mean, in the first half, Georgia played terrible. Play calling was as predictable and stale as it has been all season. Receivers couldn't catch the ball to save their lives, and we made a ton of mistakes. The secondary left receivers more open than a Waffle House, and Carson Beck got injured at the end of the half and was out for the rest of the game. So it was really, really bad. I can't really think of it being any worse for Georgia, but luckily Texas also had a pretty bad first half. I mean, they moved the ball extremely well, but they made some mistakes of their own and couldn't get it done when they got into the red zone. They missed several field goals and didn't make it into the end zone whenever they got there on every drive. I mean, it was every single drive they had were either 3 points or missed field goal. I mean, they could not get into the end zone. And it really felt like a miracle that Georgia was only down 3 going into halftime. And with Beck out, I really thought the comeback was unlikely or even dead in the water because I didn't think that a backup quarterback would be able to do what was necessary to win this game. And let me tell you, Gunnar Stockton, he came through. He didn't look great. He had trouble passing the ball. But for the most part, he made really good decisions. And he made some crucial plays in big moments, mostly on the ground. And he did it against maybe the best defense in the country. So I was really impressed there. Georgia's defense played a bit better in the second half as well. As per usual, I mean, they do this all the time. And the offense was able to get it somewhat going. Gunnar did throw a painful interception near the end of this game that almost lost us the game. But we were able to keep Texas out of the end zone and force overtime. And I really did think that once the game went into overtime, the game favored Texas. But they got held to a field goal, and Gunnar made a huge run to set up the final play where Carson Beck was able to come in for one final play and hand it off to Trevor Etienne and get the touchdown, and giving Georgia the win and a first-round bye in the playoffs. So I am definitely worried about the injuries that Georgia sustained in this game, don't get me wrong, but I'm still really proud of how this team performed, especially with the backup quarterback and having to come back. Only 3 points, but a comeback in the second half. We lost our punter, we lost our quarterback, and I know the punter doesn't sound like much, but our punter has been probably the best in the country, and he is great at creating very advantageous field position for us and, against the other team. So not to mention that the quarterback and the punter are also our starting and backup holder for field goals, which could also be an underrated advantage. But the guy who was holding it for, after that, he did perfectly fine. I'm pretty sure he was also I think he was our third string quarterback. So I hope both guys are healthy before we play again in a few weeks. But what a game this was. I really feel like Texas did not utilize Arch Manning enough in this game, and they continue to struggle in the red zone. Obviously, that's a problem. But, I mean, that Georgia's weak against running quarterbacks. I felt like you should have used Arch Manning, a mobile quarterback, more. Because the one time he came in, he got good yards. He got like 7 yards on one run, and you didn't really utilize him all that well. But I hope they continue to not do that if we meet him again, because I think that would hurt Georgia. But I still think that Texas is a major contender for the national championship, but they have to figure it out and put it all together, because there are definitely some vulnerabilities that they're going to need to have to, fix, because they're a little bit of a ways to go until they become that team. But I know they have that championship contender in them. But man, offensive struggles are tough. Not being able to kick those field goals, that's tough. So we'll see if Georgia sees them again. If so, it'll have to be in the national championship, I believe, because of the way the seeding works, but we'll see how it goes. Moving on now to Arizona State at Iowa State, or not at Iowa State, but versus Iowa State. And this was a very dominant win for the Sun Devils. I told you guys a few days ago what the key factors would be in this game when I picked Arizona State to win it. And not many people picked Arizona State to win it, but I did, because I saw something that Arizona State had that I think specifically targeted Iowa State's weakness, and that's the run game, spearheaded by Cam Skattebo. He ran all over Iowa State's defense, and I mean, it was pretty easy to see coming, because when you take a team that's so good at running the ball and has this really great running back, and you pair them against this team that's really weak against running, what do you expect? I mean, the running team is going to be able to run on the weak run defense. So that was the key to the game to me. And while Arizona State continued to have red zone issues early in the game, after the first quarter, that problem was pretty much all in the past. They played very well in the red zone, and they also won the turnover battle. Iowa State is usually pretty good about not giving up those turnovers, but they had 3 in this game to Arizona State's none. Essentially, Arizona State did exactly what they needed to do to find success here and more. And they didn't make the big mistakes or try to be something that they were not to win this game. They won the way that they have all season, and they are officially in the playoffs, and they even have a bye week, which a lot of people thought was unlikely going into or even coming out of this game. They are red hot right now, and I think that a lot of people may underestimate them, but I think that would be a big mistake if you do. They are a really, really solid team at this moment. Next, Boise State at UNLV, or I keep saying at, I'm sorry. Boise State versus UNLV. Boise State wins the battle for the G5 Autobid spot as expected, and they also have a bye. They really controlled this game all the way through. UNLV tried to mount a comeback, but it was just too little, too late. Ashton Jeanty was less quiet in this game than he was the first time these two teams played. He broke off some big runs at the seal of the game, just like I said he would. And Boise State also controlled the passing game, which was somewhat surprising to me. The quarterback did exactly what he needed to do to win this game. He was accurate and he was quick to release the ball, which opened up the run game for Ashton Jeanty. And I think home field advantage also played a huge factor in this game. It was very cold, and it was very clear that UNLV was not used to that kind of weather as much as Boise State was. And you could really tell by all the drop passes and overall slowness of UNLV compared to normal. Usually their quarterback is much better and much more successful on the ground. And it's not like Boise State is known for their defense either. In fact, they're pretty weak there. So it's really, I really think the weather is what helped them here. And it was only right to me that Boise State won this game, because all season they were the team that I felt like deserved that spot the most. They are the best and most deserving G5 school in the country. So I'm glad that they were the ones to make the playoffs, although I have to give a huge shout out to Army. What an incredible season they had. They obliterated Tulane in their conference championship game, so I didn't really expect that. So they also played really, really well, and if they would not have, done what they did to Army, and if Boise State had lost to UNLV, I would have been making the argument that Army should have been in the playoffs, but we don't have to worry about that because Boise State secured their spot. And next, I have Oregon versus Penn State. And no surprise here, the better team won, a.k.a. Oregon. Penn State put up a fight, but they seem to always be 1 or 2 steps behind Oregon. The usual suspects played well for Penn State. You got Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, Tyler Warren. They all had a great night. This Oregon defense is no joke, though. So to be able to put up that many points is fairly impressive, minus the pick 6. I was even impressed with Drew Aller tonight. Outside of the few fatal mistakes, I think he played pretty promisingly. but Oregon kept attacking Penn State's secondary, and it just kept working. Dylan Gabriel played an incredible game, and the receivers were always there to make the catch. Oregon just proved to me why they are ranked where they are, and they're just a balanced, a complete team, more than any team in the country, I think. And I was really impressed with Oregon's offensive line, especially against the defense as good at generating pressure as Penn State's. Only 1 sack is not too shabby. I mean, there is a reason that they are in consideration for the Joe Moore Award, which is, the award for the best offensive line. Even though Penn State got within a score, I know Oregon controlled the game the whole time. I feel like a lot of people felt that way. It never really felt like Penn State was going to win this game. Turns out Penn State and James Franklin still cannot win the big games. But he's got another chance going into the playoffs. He's going to be playing a pretty easy route. Anyways, that's it for the breakdown of all these games. I have another video coming out where I really break down the playoff bracket and what I think is going to happen, and also how I feel about the certain seeding. But for now, if you have any more questions or you want to see any more from me, I have plenty of videos up on my YouTube channel. I also have social media accounts. That's A_Rock321 on X and Threads. But that's all for now. I hope you guys have a great rest of your night or day whenever you're watching this. And yeah, peace.